Welcome to part 11 of this biplane tutorial series where we're creating this Boeing-Stearman Model 75. If you haven't seen the previous parts, you can find the tutorial playlist in the description. So in this part, we're going to be doing the materials for the wheels and also the materials for the tail. Now before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about a really great Blender add-on for speeding up the baking process. AutoBake is a really great Blender add-on for easy texture baking. Select the object that you want to bake, and then you can add any of the texture maps in the bake list. You can then change many of the settings like the name of the texture resolution, and where you want the add-on to export the textures. Then just hit the AutoBake button, and the add-on will automatically texture bake all the textures and save them as files on your computer. You can find my full add-on review video with the link in the description, and if you purchase the add-on through my affiliate link, you'll be helping to support this channel. So what I want to do is hide all of the other collections, but we just want to keep the collections that we're going to be adding the materials to this part. So what I'll do is hold down the control key and we'll click on the eye here next to the tail, and then hold down the shift key and click on the eye for the tail cables, also the front wheels. And it looks like if we zoom right over here, it looks like these two objects were added in the wrong collection. So we're going to move them. We're going to move them here into the tail wheel. So just put it here inside the tail wheel. So we just want to see the tail cables, and the front wheels. So these are the objects we're going to be adding materials to. So let's go into the rendered view, and we're just going to start by adding the materials that we've already added. So if we just select this piece here, let's click on the drop down, and we're going to add the yellow paint. So I can hide that object. This object here, let's also add the yellow paint, hide that object, and this one here, add the yellow paint, and we'll hide that object. Now for this one here, we are going to search for cables and just add the cable material and then hide that object. And then this here, we are going to search for the cable connectors and then hide that object. So I'm first going to be adding the material to the rudder. So what I'm first going to do is click on the drop down, and I'm going to search for top, and I'm going to add the top wing material. But then we're going to duplicate this material and make it a separate material, and I'm going to call this tail rudder. So now we can just edit this material because it's separate. So we'll go over to the shading workspace. Let's just zoom into the tail rudder. Now I don't want to add the star logo. The star logo isn't going to be added to the tail. So we're going to select all these star logo nodes and just delete them. Then what I want to do is select this object here, and let's just add the yellow paint for now. And then what we want to do is we just want to copy all of these nodes here. So the texture coordinate, mapping, noise, and mix. So just select one of them so that there's an active node, hit Control C to copy. And then if we click back here on the rudder, we'll hit Control V to paste it. And let's just join them together into a frame, and we'll add a label, and we're just going to call this dirt. Now we're also not going to be using the dirt gradient, so we'll select all these nodes and delete them, and also the larger dirt, we'll delete all of these as well. And we're going to take this dirt mix, and we're going to put that into the base color. That's going to be the new base color, and we can select these mix nodes and delete them. So we're going to have the dirt, and we're also still going to have the waves. Let's also select this bump here and press Control X just to get rid of it. Now as for the waves, if we Control Shift select the bump to try to preview it, you can't really see the waves, and that's because we need to rotate them because they're going in the wrong direction. So to be able to see the wave texture on the side here of the rudder, we want to turn the Y rotation to 90. And then also let's turn the bump strength up so you can see it better. So there we go. Now you can see there's all these little lines there. So let's just preview the principled shader, and then on the bump strength, I'll turn it to a 0.15. So it's going to be very subtle, but there's still going to be those little lines there and those bumps. So now what I want to do is create a new texture in a separate Blender file, and it's going to have a blue strip, and then it's also going to have stripes of white and red. So it's going to look very similar to an American flag. Now instead of opening up a completely new Blender file, what I'm going to do is open up my star logo Blender file, and we made this in the previous part. So I'll hit the escape key to go back here to the layout. So this is the Blender file we used in the previous part to create the star. And I'm going to duplicate this Blender file. So let's click on File, and instead of Save, we're going to click on Save As. And I'm going to call this Blender file Rudder. So we have the airplane number, the star, the US Army, but we're going to save this as a rudder. So what I'll do is go to the Add menu and add a plane, and let's bring the plane up and scale it up, and then we'll scale it up along the Y-axis. We'll go back into the camera view, and let's drag it over here, and in edit mode, let's scale it out a little bit. Now let's click here to go to the materials. Let's add a new material, and this material, we're going to set it to an emission color, and it's going to be a nice bright blue. And if you want to use the same hex code I'm using, you can add this hex code right here. Let's also select all these star objects and we're just going to delete them because we don't need them. So we'll now select the plane, we'll duplicate it and move it over. And in edit mode, we're going to scale it down just so it barely fits. And then we'll scale it up a little bit. And in object mode, let's bring it down. Let's go into edit mode and I'm going to add a loop cut. So Control R, and I'm going to scroll my mouse out and we're going to make 13 cuts. So left click and right click so they stay where they are. So we have 13 cuts. Let's now delete the material. Actually, we'll just duplicate the material. And then this material is going to be a fully white color. So just turn the red, green, blue, and alpha to fully white. We'll now add a new material. We'll click on new. And on this new material, we're going to make it an emission. And on the color, we're going to make it a bright red color. And if you want to punch in the same hex value, you can punch in this color, but it's just going to be a nice, bright, saturated red. So in edit mode, we are going to select every other face. So go to the face select, we're going to select this face, and just select every other face so it kind of looks like an American flag. We'll click here on the red, and then we'll click on the assign button. And there we go, we now have that texture there for the rudder. So let's save the project and then give this a render. So it's finished now, so we'll just click on image and save as. And I'll just save this as tail rudder as a PNG image, and then I can save and close the file. So back in our original file, let's go to the add menu. We're going to search for an image texture, and then we'll open the texture. And let's just select the tail rudder image. So now I want to mix the tail rudder into the color, so we're going to search for a mix color. We'll drop it here, and we're going to take the dirt mix, and we're going to put that into color A, and then we're going to take the tail rudder color, and we're going to put that into color B. Now what I want to do is UV unwrap this so that there's a little yellow part right here, and then the blue part is going to be right over here. So we're going to take the alpha and we're going to put the alpha into the factor. So this way when we move the texture over, it'll be alpha where the texture is moved away. Now we want to make it so it doesn't repeat. So on the repeat here, we'll change it to clip. Now let's go to side view and we'll go into edit mode. We'll select everything and we're going to unwrap project from view. So now let's go over here to the UV editor and we'll select everything. Let's go to side view and we'll zoom into the object. And let's scale this up, and you can see when I move it over, you can see if I move this way up here, you can see the alpha is going to make this part all be the yellow color. This way I'm just going to scale it down. Let's move it over. So let's just drag it over even farther, just like that. So this entire corner is yellow. Now you can see that this blue line here is way too thick, but because the texture is actually all the way the same going horizontally, we can actually just scale it along the x-axis. And so even though we're distorting the UV map, even though it appears distorted, it's not actually messing up the texture because it's straight back and forth, so it doesn't actually look any different. And then we're going to bring the blue part over just like that. So I basically want a little strip of blue down there and then blue right up there, but then this corner is going to be yellow. Let's also scale everything up on the y-axis so it's just a little bit taller so we can see all those stripes. And then if we just box select these over here on this side, let's turn on proportional editing, and we're just going to move this entire thing back. We'll scroll our proportional editing to make it smaller and just stick that right there. So the texture is a bit distorted, but it looks great on the model. So let's save this again and we'll go back to the shading workspace. Now one thing that I want to do is actually make this texture a little bit darker because it's a little bit bright, and I do want to make it a little bit darker so it maybe looks like there's just a little bit of dirt and it's not quite so bright and blown out. So I think it'll make it look more realistic. So I'm going to add a hue saturation value, and we're going to put this in between the tail rudder and color B. And now I can turn this value down, and I'm going to turn the value down to like a 0.4. So here it is before and here it is after. So you can see it just looks a little bit more gray and it's not quite as bright. And I think that looks more realistic. So let's just box select all these nodes, add them into a frame. We'll add a label, and I'll just call this Rudder Texture. And then make sure that is going into the base color, so it's adding it to the base color of the material. Now let's select the other tail rudder object, and this one isn't going to move. Now if I look closely here, you can see there's kind of a little bit of a glitch there in the modeling. So if we go into edit mode, we can just add a loop cut right here and just drag the loop cut right up there, and that should get rid of that spot. Maybe double tap G to edge slide it up. If we go to the vertex select, we can select this vertex, double tap G and just drag it up there just to kind of fix that. And then we're still using a mirror modifier on the other side. So now I'm going to duplicate this yellow paint because I'm going to add a tail number. So let's scroll right over here. We'll click on this button to duplicate the material, and I'll just call this tail number. So it's the tail number material. So what I want to do is search for an image texture. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the image texture, we're going to mix it right in here with a mix node. First though, we need to create another image texture for the tail number. So if you purchase the resource pack, you'll already get the tail number that I created, but let's now create one in a separate Blender file. So what I'm going to do is open up the previous Blender file with the airplane number, which we already created, and all the settings are already set up. But then I want to duplicate this file just in case we want to go back to this. So let's click here on File, and we'll save as. And I'm going to call this Blender file tail number. So we'll save it here with all of our other textures. We'll just save that Blender file. We'll now go into edit mode, and let's just write the tail number. Now in the United States, registered aircraft always start with a letter N. So I'm going to add the letter N. Let's scale this way down in object mode, but then I'm just going to add a few more random numbers. Now usually airplane tail numbers have 2 to 6 characters after the N. So you can of course type whatever you want. I'm going to do N3 7A2B. And I'm going to make sure these are all capital because that looks a lot better, and they usually are always capital. So if you were flying this aircraft and you were talking on the radio, talking to air traffic control or something, this airplane would be called November 37 Alpha 2 Bravo. N is November, A is Alpha, and B is Bravo. So for example, November 37 Alpha 2 Bravo requesting takeoff or something like that. So I think that's a pretty cool name. So let's save this project again. Let's go into the rendered view to make sure that looks good. Let's actually scale it up a little bit so it's a little bit bigger. And then also if we go to the materials, let's just make this color fully black. So we'll save the project again and then just go render and render image. So once it's finished rendering, let's just click on image and we will just save this. And we're just going to call this tail number, and let's just save it as RGBA, and that way it's going to store the alpha transparency as a PNG image. And we'll just save this with our other textures, so we'll just save that image, and we can save and close the file. So in our original file, let's just click on open to open the texture. And we're just going to add the tail number, and let's just open this image. So now we just need to mix it into the color, so we're going to search for a mix color. We'll drop it here, and we want to put the alpha into the factor. And then we could take the color and put it into color B, but it's just going to be fully black. So let's just take color B and just make it fully black. So let's now go into the rendered view to see how it's looking. So you can see the alpha is black and white. So that's telling it what part is going to be black, which is the letters, and what part is going to be the default yellow color. So now we need to UV unwrap this, but before we UV unwrap it, we need to apply the mirror modifier so it's not switched, it's not reading backwards. So let's go here to the modifiers. Let's apply the mirror modifier. If we go into edit mode, let's go to side view. We'll select everything and we'll unwrap from view. So now let's go to the UV editing. Let's zoom into the object so we can see it. And if we select everything, let's just scale this up. And again, you can see that it's repeating itself. So if we go to the shading, let's go to the texture, and we want to change the repeat to clip. Then we can go back to the UV editing, and we can scale it and just kind of move this around. Let's also turn off proportional editing because we don't need that anymore. Let's now go over to the other side, and you can see it is going in the wrong direction. So let's go to the face select, and we're going to select these faces here, and let's also select these faces here. So just make sure we select all those faces, and we'll scale it along the X by -1, and then we can just drag it over and just place it right there. So now it reads correctly on both sides. So let's go back here to the shading workspace. So I can hide this object and then also hide this object. So let's now select the tail light, and we'll go into edit mode and zoom into the tail light. Now adding the tail light material reminded me that we forgot to model the wing lights. So we're going to be modeling the wing lights at the end of this part just because I forgot to add it in the previous part. But let's add a material to this tail light. So let's go to the materials, we'll add a new material, and I'm just going to call this tail light. And I'm just going to unhide all the objects for now, so unhide them because I want to see what it looks like. So what I actually want to do is drag this tail light up and drag it over so it's in the white area. And then let's take the base color and we're going to make it kind of just like a light gray so it looks pretty similar to this white color. So just something like that, maybe bring it in a little bit. Let's now go into edit mode, and we're going to select all of these loops. So just select all the loops there, and this is where the light is going to be. So we'll add a new material. Let's click on new, and we're going to just call this light. And then for this light, we are going to add a glass shader. We'll drop it here, and we're going to delete the principal and plug the glass up to it. And then for the color here, we're just going to make it kind of this bright red color, but it's not going to be super saturated. And here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same exact color, and we'll just click on assign. So now we have kind of this little glass light material. So let's go back to the layout, and I want to go back to solid view, and we now need to model the wing lights because I forgot to do that in the previous part. So let's just click here on the eye to unhide the wings. We'll center the 3D cursor, and we are going to add a new object. So let's add a UV sphere. And let's bring the UV sphere up and bring it over. And then in edit mode, we're going to bring it over to this side. And then let's go to the modifiers, and we're going to add a mirror modifier so it's mirrored over to the other side. And then I want to go to top view, and I'll zoom into this, and I'll go into wireframe. Let's go to the vertex select, and I just want to delete this half side. So we'll select this half side and just delete it. So delete the vertices. And then I want to select this half side and delete the vertices. So now we just have that little corner. So we're now just going to select this entire side, and we're going to extrude this out to make it longer. And then we're going to box select this entire side and extrude that out to make it longer. Now I'd also want to select this loop and that loop, and I want to scale the loops down just so it looks a little bit more thin. And then select everything, and we'll scale that down so it's even more thin. Maybe select these two loops again and scale them down again. We could also just select this loop and bring it out a bit, and select this loop and bring it out a little bit more. So let's select all of the object, and we're going to scale it down really small and just bring it right down here. And we're going to just stick it right in here, not in the very center, a little bit more towards the front. So scale it down and just stick it right in there. And we're going to also rotate it and then just drag it inside the wing. So it's just kind of sticking outside the wing a little bit. And we'll shade the object smooth. So now let's add some materials to this. So the first material that I want to add, if I go to the materials, we're going to add the yellow paint. Let's go into the rendered view to see how that's looking. So there's the same yellow paint, but then we're going to go into edit mode. Let's go back to solid view, and we're going to select all these faces. Now an easier way to select all the circular faces here is to go to the face select. We're going to select that loop and that loop. So those both loops, then we'll just invert the selection. So now that it's inverted, we can just add a new material here. We're going to go to the drop down, and we're going to search for light, and then just click on the assign button. So if we go into the rendered view, you can now see we just have that little red light there on the corner. So let's now rename this light. So we're going to rename it to wing lights, and then we'll move it into the Boeing-Stearman Model, and we're going to put it into the wing collection. So let's now hold down the shift key and click on the wing's eye there just to hide it from the view. And then if we select all of these objects, we already added the materials, so we'll hide those objects. So now we just need to add the materials for the wheels. So let's go back to the shading workspace, and we're just going to zoom into the wheels. So let's select this object here, and we're going to type in plate. We're going to add the plane body plates, because the plane body plates has all the grunge and the details, but it doesn't have any of the textures like the tail number. Let's also click right here on this piece, and we're going to add the same object. So if we search for plates, we're going to add the plane body plates. So now what we want to do is select both objects, and we'll go into edit mode, and we'll select both objects in edit mode, and we're just going to unwrap these. So we'll just click on U, and we're just going to do the Smart UV project, and just click on unwrap. So if we go over here to the UV editing, let's zoom in here, and there's the UV island. So let's zoom into the objects, and I want to scale this up a little bit so I can see more of those textures, and I might need to rotate it, but in this case, it looks like it's actually correct. So the dribbles are dribbling down. And over here on this texture, maybe scale this up a little bit, maybe move it over so I can see a little bit more of the grunge. So let's now select this object and hide it, select this object and hide it. Let's go back to the shading workspace. So I'm going to select the shock absorber. Let's click on new, and I can just call this shocks. And this material is going to be very simple. I'm going to make it kind of this gray color. You can punch in the hex value if you want to use the same color. Let's turn the metallic value all the way up to 1, and I'll turn the roughness down to a 0.3. So we'll just hide that object. Let's also select this cylinder here, and we're also going to add the shocks. So search for shocks, and we can hide that object. Let's also select this little piece here, that little piece there, and we're going to add the bolts material. So add the bolts. So if we go into rendered view, you can see we have a nice shiny piece there. So we'll just hide that. Let's now select this cord here, and we'll add a new material. And I'm going to call this dark wire, and on the base color, I'll make it fully black. And that'll be it for that material, so I'll just hide that material. And I'll now just hit H to hide that object. Now let's select this piece here, and this piece we are going to add the bolts because it's a nice shiny material. And we'll hide that object. And these bolts as well, let's add the bolts material and then hide that object. Let's now select the hubcap, we'll click on new. We can call this hubcaps. And for the hubcaps, I do want to add a very, very subtle bump. So we're going to search for a noise texture. Let's hit Control T. We're going to use the object coordinates. Let's preview the noise texture, and I'm going to change some of the settings. So I'm going to turn the scale to a 30, and I'll turn the detail to 10, and I'll leave the other settings how they are. So let's now search for a bump node. We're going to put the noise texture into the bump height, and the bump normal can go into the normal, and let's preview the shader. Now let's turn the metallic value all the way up to 1, and I'm going to make the base color just this gray color. Now it's way too strong, so let's turn the bump strength way down to like a 0.02, just a 0.02, so it's going to be very subtle, but there will just be a tiny bit of noise over the surface. So let's now just hide this object. Now let's go over to the other side, and we're going to select this hubcap, and let's add the hubcap material. Let's hide this, and we'll select these here. Let's add the same hubcap material, but then we are going to click on this button to duplicate this material, and this one we're going to call it hubcaps darker. And then let's just take the base color and we'll just make it a little bit darker. And here's the hex value if you want to use the same color I'm using. So if I unhide everything, you can see that this piece here is just a little bit darker from that piece. So that's why I'm adding that slightly darker color. So let's just hide these objects. Now we need to add the rubber material for the wheel. So for this material, I'm going to be using my procedural smooth rubber material, and I already created a tutorial on how to create this material. So if you want to go ahead and watch that tutorial, link to that is in the description. Or if you purchase the resource pack, you'll also get that procedural rubber material. Or if you're one of my customers with my ultimate procedural material pack, you'll already have the smooth rubber material in the ultimate material pack. So you can just drag and drop it from the asset browser into the blend file and just add it onto the tire. So for those of you who have maybe purchased the material or done the tutorial, let's just add it into the blend file. So let's click on File, and we'll click on Append. And I'm going to navigate to the blend file where I have the rubber material. Let's go inside the blend file, and then we're going to go to Materials, and then we're going to add the smooth rubber and click on Append. So now if we click on the material and click on the drop down, we can type in smooth, and we're just going to add the smooth rubber material. Now, there are just a few things I want to change to this rubber material. So one thing that I want to do is change the base color. So I'm just going to make it a very light gray. And here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same color. So it's just slightly brighter. And what's really cool about this material is it's customizable. It's joined into a node group. So you can change the roughness, you can change the scale of the texture, and you can change like the scratches and the bump strength. I'm going to keep most of the settings how they are because I do like this. However, I am going to go into the node group by hitting tab. And what I'm going to do is go over here to the principled shader, and I'm going to open up the subsurface, and I'll turn the subsurface weight all the way up to 1. So this will allow light to go through the mesh. A little bit of light will go through the mesh, so it makes the rubber look a little bit more soft and rubbery. So let's go back to the layout here, and I'll hit Alt-H to unhide all the objects. And let's now hold down the Shift key, and we're going to show the wing cables and struts, the wings and the body. So there's all the materials that we've done so far. This airplane is really starting to come together. It's looking really cool. So just save the project again, and that'll wrap it up for this part of the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching. And in the next part, we're going to continue doing more of the materials. So when the next part is released, it'll be right up there on the end screen, and the link will be in the description. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.